the link in the private chat?
Um, yeah, let me let me see how to do that. Hello, hello. Uh, okay, it's in a Facebook group. So,
Oh, okay. No worries.
okay, but you can join the group, of course.
Okay, awesome.
Uh, I'm just we should be live.
I
It's
see
telling me
live.
we're live. Okay. We've got somebody watching. Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome. We will pause for a little bit to give people a chance to get on and for me to see if I can find it because with using, what is this, StreamYard, and I have the ability to see the comments that people make in the Facebook group, but I can't reply to them. Yeah, I don't know if this is a StreamYard thing or if this is because I'm using the free account thing or what. So I'm trying to toggle between being in Facebook and being over here. Okay. All right. So I got a phone here. Let me pull that up as well. Okay. So good afternoon, everybody. Um, As I mentioned yesterday, hi, I'm Adelia. We're going to talk about how to handle an emergency when you are abroad. And joining me today, we've got Kenna Williams, who is currently in Johannesburg, South Africa. We've got Roxanne Munson, who is in Mexico City. And we've got Joan Hardy. And remind me, Joan, you're in San Diego? San Francisco?
I'm in San Diego right now.
San Diego. Okay. And all three of these ladies have had some interesting experiences with emergencies abroad. I can see your comments. So if you have a question, be sure to drop it in the comments and we'll get that answered. But first, I thought it might be good for each of the ladies to share. Does anybody want to go first? Joan, you're unmuted. So we'll start with you.
Okay, sure. My name is Joan Hardy, and I live in Ensenada, Mexico, which is right on the border of California. And like a lot of Black women, I started developing issues with fibroids. And I just assumed that if I changed my diet and do some other things that it would improve. Unfortunately, I had a lot of complications when I was in Ensenada, which forced me to to leave the country and to come to the United States because one, I had was bleeding so heavily that there's not a blood supply or a blood facility where they can give you a transfusion. So I had to return to the United States. This was occurring during COVID, so the blood supply was low anyway. I ended up coming back. They stabilized me. I went back to Ensenada. It happened again. So at this point, my doctors were like, these were my doctors in Ensenada. They were like, you need to have surgery, but our hospitals are full right now with COVID patients. So we're going to put you in contact with doctors in San Diego. Also, their hospitals were full, but they put me on medication to stabilize me until I had surgery last week. I am still in San Diego recovering. I was they performed the procedure. I ended up having the tumors removed. I am one of those rare people that the tumor I had, only two people that they are aware of have had this type of tumor. Although it mimics a fibroid tumor, it was not a fibroid tumor. So they removed it. I was in the hospital for 4 days. On my second day of surgery, I looked back at the video and I can't believe I did this, but I sent a video to Adelia saying, I'm in a hospital we need to talk about what happens when you're living abroad and you have a medical emergency. So I'm slowly recovering, and I hope to return back to Mexico and by the end of next week.
Wow, I'm still blown away by that you, because I'm thinking like she should be taking care of herself, and here she is sending me a message. How when you went back to the US the first time, how did you just book a commercial flight? Were you medevaced out? How did that work?
I was not well, I was able to get a ride because the border right now is closed. Ensenada, I'm an hour and a half away from the border. So it was just getting someone local to drive me to the border. And the first time I walked across, because I have global entry, from the time I left the car, I walked across. It took me 10 minutes to get into the United States. That was the first time, and I was pretty healthy. The second time, there was no way I could walk across, but there was a dual citizen that drove me across the border, and I was able to get to the hospital that way.
And you mentioned this was in the heat of COVID, and at the time, because Ensenada is in Baja California.
That's correct.
What were they? Because in Mexico, we have a stoplight system with green being 100% open and red being on lockdown. Do you remember what color the state was at the time?
I believe we were orange.
Okay. So in theory, there should have been some space in hospitals, that sort of thing. Whereas in Mexico City, when we were on red, there was no space. And this is something Roxanne and I talked about quite a bit, that if there were any emergency at all, we were basically SOL, because
Right.
there was no room. And the few private hospitals that contemplated, they were going to take a case by case basis. The minimum they wanted up front was 300,000 pesos, which is about 15 grand USD, I believe.
Right.
And that was up front.
Right.
You have medical insurance?
I do. So I had GNP, which is a insurance that I had in Mexico, especially when I lived in Jalisco, because that's the center of the country. I use GNP. I also have U.S. insurance. So what I did was, even with the private hospital, if I wanted to remain in Mexico and have my surgery, I could not, because no doctor would do it because the blood supply was so low. So I had to go to the United States for my surgery.
And if you were someone like me who does not have U.S. insurance, that could be tricky.
In that case, what happened, and because one of the things they did say to me is, this is your blood type. Send out Facebook posts to your friends to see who shares that blood type, so that we can test and bank that blood in case you do need it. So that was the other option. And I'm sure you guys are seeing those posts in some of the expat groups where they're asking, if you have this blood type, if you are under the age of 62, can you please donate?
Oh, wow. Okay. Kenna, let's talk to you and let's hear your story. You actually have two, but let's start. I'd forgotten about that.
Yes.
Because you do not live a boring life, not at all. Let's talk about the most recent one first.
Okay, my most recent one was I just recovered from COVID. I like to call it a stint in jail, basically, because that's what it felt like. Back in December, I somehow was feeling pretty weird on December 17th. In my mind, I thought I just had typical allergies because, I was like, oh, this is what it feels like. I know this is my allergies. 3 days after that, I called a friend and I said, hey, can you take me to the doctor? They said, sure. I go to the doctor and I'm feeling like, again, allergies, severe allergies, sinus issues, or what have you. The doctor tells me, he says, oh, you probably have COVID. And I was like, nah, not me. I don't have COVID. He's like, I think you do. So let's take the test. So we took the test, and they said it would be 24 hours before I would hear back from them. Basically, 5 hours later, I got a text message, downloaded the information, and sure enough, I have COVID. Had COVID at the
Let
time.
me
So
let me just interject really quickly. What kind of test did you take? Do you know?
the PCR test,
So they went
where
up the
it's, yes, one of the nose. But I didn't really feel it. I think because I was feeling so bad that I just didn't feel it at all. So that was December 20th. Took the test, and the next day felt like horrible. The 22nd, I was in my house, basically holding on to the walls just to walk around. I could barely like get around. The third day, um, I've had pneumonia before, walking pneumonia before, and I was like, this is weird. This feels like pneumonia. And all of a sudden, I noticed my hands were shaking. Um, my breathing was off. And I was thinking, okay, you got two choices, Kenna. You can either sit here and do nothing and die, or you can get up, make a call, and get out of here and get yourself some help. So I contacted the ambulance here, and called, and they came, picked me up. They, gave me oxygen, and took me out of here. And they asked me which hospital I want to go to. So of course, I wanted to go to the closest hospital in my neighborhood, which is only roughly 2 miles away. We get there, it's full. I can't get in. Mind you, I'm on oxygen. Who knows how long this oxygen is going to last that I'm on. So they asked me, well, where's the next hospital that you would like to go to? And I'm thinking, I've been in Joburg long enough, but I don't know all of the hospitals here. So they called another hospital, and they were able to take me about maybe 10 miles or so away from where I was to a hospital. I was able to get in that hospital. I had to wait for a while. I had to get in. And you brought up an interesting point. This is a big mistake I made. I have global health insurance, so I can use my coverage anywhere in the world, also in the United States. But the day I left, I think I must have blacked out because I left. I only had on like a nightgown, flip flops. Everything wasn't in my purse. I didn't have my insurance card with me, but I had my credit card with me. So when I got to the hospital, they considered me a private patient, and they wanted a guarantee. So I paid like 100,000 rand, which equates to about $7,000. That was just a get-in fee. So ended up doing 14 days in ICU, 4 days in recovery, so 18 days in the hospital here in Johannesburg.
Now, you were considered a private patient. Are those completely separate hospitals than if you were needing public care?
Yes, they have public hospitals here and also private, but my friends that are South African pretty much told me you do not want to step foot in a public facility, because they pretty much said if you had gone there, you would have probably never made it out. So I figured my life is worth whatever this bill is and more. Let me just, take care of myself. I'll deal with the bill later.
Okay. And because you did not have is your insurance policy one that would direct pay, or was it going to be one that you would need to be reimbursed?
For this one, had I had my card, it would have been a direct pay. They would have paid the hospital directly, all of the physicians, the physiotherapists, and so forth. So what happened with that was actually I just finished my bill last week. I ended up paying the full bill. So I paid a bit by bit or whatever, paid it off. And my insurance company, they actually reimbursed me the full amount minus my deductible. So, and it was, considering where I am, the bill was about 22,000, but I had to pay it.
I mean, that's a lot, but I keep reading about people in the United States with $1 million plus bills.
Yeah.
Yes. And fortunately, I was able to go back and use my insurance to, get my funds back. It took probably about a month or so, about maybe a month and a half to process everything, but it did process. I think, had I not blacked out somewhere, this would have been a different process.
And is that common for private hospitals to accept credit cards?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, because that's a concern of mine, because I tend not to keep a lot of cash on me for fear of like getting shook down by the cops,
Yeah.
that sort of thing.
Mhm.
So one of my plans is just to play poor. Like, oh no, I don't have any money, but if there's an emergency, it would be really great if a hospital took a credit card instead of looking at me like, where is your 300,000 Mexican pesos? What insurance company are you with, Kenna?
The company that I have here is called Now Health. They are based in the UK and also in Dubai in the UAE. And they have been um, pretty supportive. They do answer messages. You can call them, talk to them on the phone. So they're very responsive. Now responsive to you. The policy, a lot of people always ask me how much is the policy, and for this particular policy, I have slightly paid just a little bit over $3,000 a year. But the reason is because I have U.S. coverage. If I did not have U.S. coverage, this policy will probably be 800, 900, maybe. But that U.S. portion, it gets me every time, which is a good thing also because I've actually had to use the policy in the States. So I'm glad to have it.
Well, that was going to be my next question is, had you ever used that policy prior to this emergency?
Yes, I did. I did.
Yeah. And the one thing I wanted to jump in is that when my insurance agent, they always told me, make sure you take a picture of your insurance card and save it in your photos. In case you don't have your insurance card with you, they can still obtain the information they need. So that's a tip that I follow because of my agent.
Mm-hmm.
I keep a copy or a photo. I have a folder in my Google Photos, my passport, my license, front and backs of my credit cards. And I guess now I need to add my insurance card to that.
Absolutely.
Okay. Again, guys, if y'all got any questions, drop them in the comments. Now, this was not your first medical emergency abroad, Miss Williams.
No, it's not. It's not. This is probably the second major one that I've had. For those of you that are in various travel groups, if you've heard of Panama 13, in 2015, I was involved in a very serious accident that took place in Panama, Panama, where a group of friends, we went there the year prior, so 2015. We actually went to do the trip again. And unfortunately, we were coming down a hill. Our vehicle lost control. We went over a cliff, and unfortunately, two of my friends were ejected and passed away at the scene. Another person has been, still in a severe state even to this day. Everybody in that accident was severely injured, whether there was broken backs, broken ankles, broken legs, arms, mangled, just all different types of incidents there. So for me, I had a lot of cuts on my arm and legs, and I had a broken ankle. So for this particular trip, every trip prior to this particular trip, I had help. I would purchase travel insurance, and this is the one trip I forgot. I forgot to purchase insurance for the trip. So in that particular accident, I still don't know how people were able to find us. We were literally in the sticks and the hills of this is a place where if you live here, this is the only way you would know that there's something here. So somehow I guess people must have heard the commotion, and I'm assuming we were probably crying or what have you. People came to help us. We had somebody come and saw off the vehicle, the top of the vehicle, so we could be pulled out. The local military actually came and airlifted me to one of the hospitals there, public hospital there. And I spent about a week in that hospital in Panama. Then I flew to my hometown, had surgery there. So my hospital bill in Panama, in that particular country, it was so low. It was only $700 for about a week. So and that was in I won't say it was the best care, so I won't say that.
But you're here to tell the story.
I'm here to tell the story.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's another person that was in our accident. We jokingly say that she had the better treatment because she ended up at a private hospital. I ended up at a public hospital. So I was in a room with 6 other people, and this is probably one thing where I guess, like I say, learning something is I don't speak Spanish. And there was only one doctor that spoke English, and his English wasn't the greatest. So there was a friend of mine that would come there to do translations to help out because it was touch and go a few days. But like I said, that insurance, I normally purchase, like, when you purchase your flights, you maybe add on the flight insurance or you buy a separate policy. But that was the only trip that I did. And once I got to this,
like with World Nomads or Safety Wing or somebody like that.
Right, something like that, Travel Guard or whoever you want to use the insurance. Once I got to the States, I actually transferred back over to my, at that time I was working, so I went back to my work insurance for surgery at that time.
And so obviously you were sent to a public hospital because you couldn't prove that you had insurance. You didn't have insurance.
I don't know if that was the reason. I think that they looked at the severity of how people were injured. There was someone else that was far worse off than me, and I think that's why she went to a private hospital. Where my situation, they were like, okay, it looks like everything is intact. Let's take you here, because it was 13 of us.
Okay. Now, what were the conditions like in your in the public hospital? Because I know that here in Mexico, like, you got to bring your own sheets. You probably need to arrange your own meals. Yes. You're not going to get a room by yourself, that sort of thing. Okay.
That's exactly how it was. So my friends that were there, they would bring me food. I was like spaced out. So I really didn't know what was going on. So they would bring my meals to me. They would come in a couple times a day to do translations because I couldn't do it. But yeah, they bring everything. You want something to drink? Your family needs to bring it in there. They need to feed you or what have you. So I'd never seen that before. I'm thinking, where are the bills?
Well,
no.
And what happens if you didn't have people there? Like if I'm just in a country where I don't really know anybody on the ground and I get injured and I end up at a public hospital, am I just SOL?
At that point, I think that you would probably have to work out something with like a patient advocate. Maybe you'd have to pay for meals for someone to bring in the meals. But it was my friends basically bringing me food every day to eat.
Oh, wow. Wow. Roxanne lives here in Mexico City, but before she did, she was a nurse. So I wanted her insight, because she thinks about things that I was going to say normal people, that the rest of us don't necessarily think of. But you were also involved. It wasn't your medical emergency, but you were there when one was happening.
I was. So a few years back, I have 2 situations, but the one I'm going to tell you guys about, because it gave me a lot of clarity. I love to hike, and I go hiking all the time. And I was with a group, and it was probably about 15 of us. And we were in this remote part of Mexico, about an hour and a half, 2 hours outside of Mexico City. And we were having a good old time. We didn't have walkie-talkies. We knew our cell phones wouldn't work. We were just having a good time. And we had always had our main organizer, and we had 2 guides. And normally our group is about 10, but this was a big group this day. And I never tell anybody that I'm a nurse, but in this particular situation, I just felt compelled to have conversation. Hey, I'm a nurse. I practice in the US. Da, 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 da. End of story. About 2 hours into the hike, we were walking across this log, and my friend fell. And below the log was water, and it was cold. It was freezing. And she fell off the log. She hit a log that was on the bottom, and she fell into the water. Now, naturally, everybody's like gasping. I didn't see it happen because I was in the back of the queue, but people are gasping. So I rush up to the front to kind of see what's going on with all the commotion. And as the guides that were there trying to kind of like lead us along this log. They're in the water with her. And she said, I think I broke something. I think I broke my ribs. So me being now a medical person, I'm like, okay, I know it took us about 2 hours to get up here, and it was not an easy walk up this mountain. And she's saying she thinks she broke her ribs, and she's kind of like, now she's cold. She's having some difficulties, but I don't know what else she could have broken because she hit this log. So I'm like, okay, let's get her out of the water. You guys clear space, and let's just get her somewhere safe where we were. So the whole time we're trying to get her to maybe like what would take you 30 seconds to walk. She was more labored doing it. And so, of course, everybody that's seeing this, they're freaking out. What's going to happen? Oh, my gosh. Okay. So to speed up the story, we basically said we need a plan. So I basically said anybody that's not going to be helpful, just go down. The ones who will be helpful, which were about 4 of us, we stayed with her. And one was actually another nurse. But she, like myself, we weren't practicing because we lived in Mexico. And they went down with the guides to get help. It took them about 3 hours to get all the way down, get help, and then to come back up to us. Okay? So when they came back up to us now, she is freezing. She can't breathe. I don't know what's going on with her. She's getting into hypothermia. We can't really give her but so much because I mean, you got to take care of yourself too. So we're like, we had layers on, but we're giving her as much as we can, but we couldn't physically move her because anytime we moved, she would cry because, you know, she was injured. It took us about 3 hours to get back up. Took us about 2-something hours to get her down to the ambulance. I was naive, y'all. I thought they knew she had fallen. They knew she was in pain. They knew she had labored breathing. The medical assistance that was going to show up was going to be equipped with what she needs. So me being the nurse that I am, I'm like giving like, okay, you know, we need to get her this. I'm assessing the situation when I get to the ambulance. And the guy's like, you know, like, no, we're going to take her to a hospital, but it's an hour away. We don't have any oxygen on this ambulance. We can't give her pain medicine. I speak struggle Spanish, so I don't know any medical Spanish, but one of the ladies who stayed with me up there, she spoke Spanish. So she's relaying my irritation to the EMT or the driver. I'm just going to call him a driver because he couldn't do anything. And my friend is like trying to zone out. Like, I don't know if she's seeing the Lord or she just needed to close her eyes. But I'm like, you are not going to close your eyes on me because I cannot watch you do it. I wasn't going to say die, but I was like, I can't watch you do anything. So I'm freaking out. I'm stressed out. We get to the hospital and the main leader of our group is there. And we show up and they want money. I can tell you if this was a private hospital or a public hospital, but it was a small town hospital in Mexico. And we were like, who takes a lot of money on a hike? I think I had maybe 1,000 pesos.
Which is like $50.
Yeah. My friend who was injured, I think she had 2,000 pesos. And the other one maybe had like 1,000 pesos. And they wanted something like, 20,000 pesos, something crazy. And we were like, we don't have it, but she needs to get in here. So we basically were like, okay, we're going to call her husband. We're going to get this ball rolling. But they lived like 2 hours away from where we were. So he wasn't going to be there in time and she needed to go to another hospital. The good thing about having somebody who knows how to communicate, who knows how to work the system is the lady who organized our tour. She was very forthcoming in saying, we don't have money to pay for this bill, but she needs help. And as soon as we get her situated and get her transported to another hospital, we promise you we will come and bring you the money. And I think because they probably looked at us like, okay, 3 foreign women, they clearly don't look like they are up to no good. We're going to take their word for it. But I say all that to say that is not common. And they were like, like you need to leave stuff with us to make sure you come back, that kind of thing. But I think for me, it was one of those things where I now make a point of telling people, pay attention to what the situation looks like where you're going. What's the hospital situation like? Do they speak your language? Do they offer the type of medical care that you're going to need? Because this hospital was able to get my friend stable enough to get her transported to Mexico City. But I don't know how well she would have fared if she had to stay there overnight, because they just didn't see her level of trauma. Because literally she did break about 2 or 3 ribs, and they were able to do an x-ray, but they didn't have any type of facilities and equipment to really take care of her. And I think these are conversations that people really don't have. You know, I mean, when I started telling people with the COVID thing, hospitals in Mexico City are full. And if they're not full, they want about 1 million pesos where I live to go in there. Do you have 1 million pesos? And they might not take your insurance. And that's something people don't even think about. We have international insurance and we're covered, but people don't like these conversations. People don't want to have these conversations. People are like, you know, nothing will happen. And then when they do, they're putting out maydays on Facebook, like, help me, you know, go fund me. And that
GoFundMe is not an option here in Mexico. Like, that's not even going to work. Now, when y'all were at the hospital in this little town, the issue wasn't so much how much they wanted. It was their insistence that it be cash.
Their insistence that they weren't taking credit cards. So I'm glad, Joan, that you said that about the credit card, because that's now going to be something that I say to ask about, because where we were, because I always have my credit card on me because life happens, right? Sometimes you just need to get out of a bind. They had no interest in our Visas, MasterCards, American Express.
Do you know if they would have taken bank transfer? Because I was having this conversation the other day with somebody, like, I could, you know, would they take a bank transfer, or if it has to be cash, I'm kind of screwed.
These people were not hearing anything else except this is the bill. This is what we need to have before we start administering care. And me and my friend were like sweating bullets because, like I said, I had like 1,000 pesos and I could not pull any money from the air. Like, I mean, even if I sent my husband a text to say, hey, come here, he wouldn't even know where to find me. You know, it was that like remote type of area, you know? So yeah, girl. So I just say that is a question that needs to be asked. If you know you're in a city, especially, you know, I'm big on traveling around Mexico, a lot of small towns I hit. And these are questions that I now keep top of mind that I didn't think about before.
That now needs to be on your checklist when you're choosing a hotel or you're looking to see what activities. Also add, where is the closest hospital? What kind of hospital is it? That sort of thing. We had a question about insurance. They asked specifically about Safety Wing. Have either of you used Safety Wing? I hear about it a lot among digital nomads because I know someone who, at the beginning of the pandemic, opted to stay in Mexico outside the United States, and Safety Wing was one of the few that was offering to cover COVID. Yeah. So I don't know if anybody had any experience with them. I will say, okay, well, let me ask this, because I think this might also help this particular, the person who asked this question. Is there anything that you think people should be looking for, like, as they are evaluating coverage? Is there something they need to be looking for?
And I'll say one. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll say one thing. For my particular insurance that I have, a lot of companies will tell you that they will not cover pre-existing conditions. They will. You just will pay extra for it. So for the coverage that I have, I think that's why mine is a little bit probably more expensive than others, because it's covering some of my pre-existing conditions. So if a company says no, push it until you can get what you want, because they will cover it. You just have to pay more for
extra.
it.
Yeah. And then And in regards to what, if your insurance will be covered, this is what I did. I know a lot of people, I mention this all the time, that you guys have a knack for finding the perfect Airbnb or things like that. When I travel, especially when I moved, I scheduled 3 appointments with doctors, not because I was sick, but that is the way I learned about the healthcare system in Mexico. I sat with them and I wanted to know, what hospital should I go to? What insurance should I get? What insurance do you have? And I did that with 3 different doctors because I wanted, and it cost me $20 because it was an appointment. They were like, this is so weird. I'm like, I'm not sick. I just literally, you post that question on Facebook, you're going to get 30 different answers. I'm just going to go to the person. So I went to 2 doctors and a hospital administrator. So that is the best advice I can give people. And they will tell you if your insurance is covered. You can also contact the hospitals directly, and they will also give you that information. And that's how I ended up with GNP.
Well, I moved back to Mexico in July and had getting insurance on my list because I had actually hit Kenna up for the name of her company because I had started looking before I got here, and then that kind of fell off. And then I looked around and I was like, there's a pandemic. I need to make sure I have insurance. And so I started shopping around and I opted to get Mexican insurance. I don't know yet if that was a wise decision. Like, I may discover that I really should get more of international healthcare, health insurance, because as it stands right now, in theory, when I call, there's no guarantee people are going to speak English, or I don't know how many hoops I got to go through to get somebody who speaks English. But my thought was, this is a insurance. It's Monterrey Seguros Monterrey. It's like GMP here in Mexico. It's something that I know is widely accepted. So that's the reason I opted there. But I did notice with a lot of the policies here, they were very upfront with, they didn't cover pre-existing conditions, and they had waiting periods, which was something new that I was not used to in the United States, because with the United States, when, coverage starts October 1st, everything is covered. Here, depending on the condition, there is a waiting period built in. So I had a 30-day waiting period that I had to cross my fingers and hope I didn't get COVID. Otherwise, they were not going to cover it. Yeah. But then there are things like various cancers, maternity, and there's a waiting period for that. So I guess they don't want you to already have it, and then they have to pay out. They want to know that, at least for the last year or the last year and a half, you were okay, and then this developed. Again, if anybody's got questions, go ahead and drop them in there. But I will say this about insurance, that I don't see it being clarified enough. There is travel insurance, which is going to cover your flight delay, your lost baggage. And Kenna, you can jump in here because you're the travelpreneur. It's going to cover delays, things like that. But it may not cover medical things, or you need to at least make sure it covers some medical evacuation. Kenna?
Yeah, that's a really great point. I'm glad you brought that up, because a lot of people, I purchased this plan, and you look at it, I'm like, well, that's for your bags. That's for your bags. That's for your flight is delayed. I'm like, what about your health? What if something happens to you? So at the time, before I moved overseas, I had a policy through, if I can remember, the company was called Tokyo Marine, a bizarre name for a company. However, their policy was about a little under $200 a year, and it would cover you for any medical issues that you could have overseas up to 45 days, for a trip that was up to 45 days. So that was something that I had just in case. But since I'm now living here, I have a real global policy through Now Health. But if you're just traveling, and you're still maintaining your stateside residence, I would recommend something like a annual medical policy.
Yeah, and don't try to don't try to game the system and I'm going to move abroad, but I'm going to get travel medical insurance, which is not intended for someone who lives abroad. It is like the plan you mentioned, and I used to have I can't remember the name of the company, but it's a very Allianz, I think it was. I had an annual policy. Alliance. I had an annual policy with them. But like you said, there is a limit to the length of the trip and how many trips maybe that you can have a year. So don't try and if you're just traveling, that's fine. As long as it's got medical evacuation. It would be great if they would pay for whatever medical emergency you had directly. Just know that if it's an insurance company that does that, you'll probably have to pay a little extra. That's not going to be your bargain basement company. But if you are actually living abroad, you need international health care, health insurance, global health insurance, sometimes it's called. You can possibly save some money there if you don't get coverage in the United States. According to my insurance agent, my Mexican policy covers me all over the world. Now, if I'm in the US, it's reduced, but in theory, I should at least, if something were to happen for the hot 5 seconds I'm in the United States, I should be covered.
I wanted to add, we have Cigna International, and it's been excellent for us. It's actually better. We have better insurance living outside of the US than we did in the US. I will say this, the pushback that I get when I tell people to get some type of insurance, travel insurance, what have you, they're like, oh, I don't need that. I'm not going to spend that extra money. I'm only going to be there for like 5 days. So my question to the people that are in this conversation, what is a conversation you're having with those type of people because of the experiences that you've had to let them know, yeah, you might not want to spend the additional money, but if life happens and life shows up sometimes and we don't realize it's about to show up, how do you address that pushback with people like that?
Well, for me personally, I'll say because I've been through this situation, honestly, I just show people my arm. I say, look at this, look at this, look at these scars. They're here. And this is because I didn't have insurance or whatever. It cost me this to do this. I had to buy another flight to come back to the States and things of this nature. So I think for me, it's easy to just do like this, but most people don't ask me because they already know, they know the story. And then you can see, and people ask, well, what happened? And you say this, and oh, I forgot to buy the insurance. Oh, I should buy that insurance. And a friend of mine is actually coming to visit me this month. And she called me last week. Should I buy insurance? I was thinking, you of all people, you should know not to ask me that question. The answer is yes. You should buy it, even if you never use it. And if you don't want to buy it, buy yourself a full medical policy for $200 a year that will cover you up to 30 to 45 days for a trip. So if you're taking multiple trips, buy a bigger package.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me ask this. Given the emergency that you experienced, is there something that you wish you would have done to prepare? Your experience in Panama, Kenna, the obvious answer there is you wish that you would have bought the insurance that time. But is there something else that would have made your most recent situation better had you done this thing?
For my recent situation, I would say, and I never thought I would need this, is to maybe have a list of 3 hospitals. Because especially with COVID and hospitals being full, and this is the first time I've ever been to a hospital on oxygen where I could not get in. At that point, you start thinking, I'm about to die because I can't get in at this moment. So I think this experience has taught me personally to have a list, have a backup, have a 1, 2, 3, your neighborhood hospital, the next hospital, and another one just in case. And if you have to go public, let that be the last option for you.
We had people here in Mexico City where their relatives were driving them around trying to find a place to get them in 16 hours, 18 hours trying to find a spot.
Yeah.
I think for me, I will never again be naive and, excuse me, assume that all things are equal. I was not specific. I told the people who were going down what was needed. I was not specific in saying we need an ambulance that's equipped with personnel that can administer pain medicine to her, oxygen to her, stabilize her enough that this transportation that was going to be over an hour would be a good one. I didn't know it was going to be that long, but these are things I just assumed would be normal, you know? And so I would say if anything were to happen with me like this again, I would be very specific. This is what I need, kind of like what you said. The hospital we need to go to, like, yeah, get an equipped ambulance that can take us from here all the way to Mexico City. The fact that we had to go to just a little hospital, then get in another ambulance and go to another hospital, it was just too many steps. And I'm just grateful that it turned out fine, but it could have turned out some way totally different. So I would say for me, just be real specific in what I need and not assume.
Joan, anything to add?
I think, everyone has covered really great points. And, with me being on the border, it will be multiple ambulances for me because I will have to be driven to the border in an ambulance. Then there will be a U.S. ambulance that will meet me at the border. And with COVID, the one thing that I don't know if you guys know this, but before, the prices of ambulances have increased drastically. Before, it probably would cost about $300 to $400 to get you to the border. It's up to $1,000 now. So those are costs with the COVID that you have to keep in mind, is that medical costs are going up. And you always hear people say, oh, healthcare is so inexpensive. It is inexpensive until you get sick or need it. So I think that what really concerns me, especially when I see all these retirees coming here, assuming that they can just self-pay. You can't, you can if you have a disposable income, but if you are in a fixed income, you really need to consider if you have the funds to help you with your medical costs.
I think, I have not experienced a medical emergency, but one of the things that kind of opened my eyes rather recently, and I shared this with the ladies before we went live, someone had suggested a Mexican movie on Netflix called Midnight Family, and it follows a family that runs an ambulance service here in Mexico City. And I was naive. I assumed ambulances were operated by the municipality, some kind of government. And I also assumed there was a certain level of training and, a certain level of supplies in an ambulance. And as Roxanne's story illustrates, that is not the case. We learned from Joan that there is a difference between a paramedic and an EMT. An EMT cannot give you like pain meds and that sort of thing. And as I watched it, and I found out that in this city of 9 million people, there are only 44 ambulances that are owned by the city. Any other ambulance is private. And as they followed these people around, like how in the US, tow trucks race each other to get to the scene? It's the same thing here with ambulances. So unless you have the number of a specific ambulance you want called, you are at the mercy of who shows up, whatever level of stock they have, whatever skill they have. And that kind of shook me because there were certain things that I just accepted as this is how it is throughout the world. And that is not the case.
Correct.
So now I've got to reevaluate my plan and do I need to now investigate ambulance? Do I need to talk to people at my insurance company and get the list of these are the acceptable ambulances? It's a whole thing. And I know y'all, it's a pain to think about. But if you don't prepare for it, you don't try and anticipate it, you know, things could go, they could go left big time.
I would like to
Okay.
say this. Another situation that happened here was a young man got severely ill with altitude sickness. He was here on vacation with his girlfriend, and he was actually in the hospital in the ICU. His family lived in the US. And it just so happened that his cousin and myself were in the same sorority. And she had enough sense to put out a mayday in a Facebook group. Anybody know anybody that lives in Mexico City, because my cousin needs help? And people who knew me reached out and said, Rox lives there. Contact her. And so I say all that to say, in the times where technology is big, there are Facebook groups, you know, for almost every little, you know, city or country. Plug into one of them. Even if you don't use it, have some type of connection. Say, you know, just an introduction. Hey, you know, I'll be in Mexico City for 5 days. You know, I just want to put my name out there, so in case I have any questions or whatever, I can contact somebody. Because I have helped several people just because they were in a Facebook group. I saw their post and I sent them a private message saying, hey, you need to do this. Hey, I can help you with this. So especially solo travelers, because I know this is in your solo travelers group. This might be something that people don't really think about, but it is a huge plus if you have a connection on the ground, a local or another an expat person or somebody who's familiar with the place, because that could be another game changer for you. So I would say, if you don't do anything else, you know, beyond the insurance, because we really want you to do that, plug into somebody that's local, and just, you know, just have that in your back pocket in the event that you need something. They can help you.
Roxanne, I was going to say, that is really good. I will say, after I had my accident in Panama, I think I scared my family so much to the point where I was kind of forced into doing a private family Facebook group where literally, as a solo traveler, I had to say, I'm going to Jordan this week at these days, staying here with this person. I'm going to this.
Yeah.
That's what they made me do, because it was one of those things where as travelers, we think, you know, I'm grown. I'm in my 40s. I'm like, oh, nobody's looking for me. I don't have any children, no husband. No one's looking for me. You know, I'm just out here doing my thing. And then, you know, that's when life happens to you. So I actually have my Facebook family group where they know my address here, everything, who my backup people are here. If something happens to me, call this person because they know how to get to me. And another thing that I will say for your listeners that are listening, if you are a traveler, have somebody in your family that if you need help that can come fly to you. So somebody needs a passport. So someone in your family needs to be able to come to you if you needed that type of assistance. And I remember when my parents were alive, when I had my accident in Panama, my mother wanted to fly down. And I was like, no, she had her passport, but I said, no, I didn't want her to come at the time. But if someone really, really needs you, they need to be able to come. Otherwise, it's just a hard thing.
No, I have a person in the place where I live. It's different when I travel, but then I have somebody back in the US who has a passport and actually I've added them as a authorized user on my credit card. That way, you know, I'm not trying to be in anybody's pocket, but I don't want somebody to be like, I can't come because I can't come up with the money for airfare. Like, here, you have the credit card. Go ahead and charge on that. Roxanne talked about Facebook groups. I will add this, that if you are more comfortable connecting with people on the ground who look like you know that you search for Facebook groups, Black expats in blah, 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 brothers and sisters in blah, blah, blah. I'm not trying to dissuade anybody from using the more inclusive expat groups, but just know that sometimes those groups are really, really large, and you may get you may not get as much assistance in your situation. So, and I, like, I know when I travel by myself, I like to connect with people who look like me. I'll also add, because I travel solo, I use the app, and I just forgot the name of it, TripIt. And what I do with TripIt, everything gets added into TripIt. Even like, oh, I am going to wander around this neighborhood from this time to this time. And every trip I go on, there are 3 people, my friend, my cousin, and my daughter. They get access to it. And I have explained, if I don't show up, I turn up missing, you haven't heard from me in 3 days. These are the breadcrumbs so that you can figure out where I was, what I was doing, so that if you need to contact the authorities, you can say, well, she was supposed to be in this neighborhood at this time, or she went, like, this was the driver that picked her up from the airport, or whatever. Anything else y'all want to add, ladies?
No, but I want to say thank you for that tip, because that is something that I feel as though my Facebook posts are my crumbs, but I need to have insane time crumbs. And I do not do that. So I greatly appreciate you saying that, because that's something I need to do. And
my responsibility is that while I am traveling, if things switch up, I go into TripIt and I update, like I wasn't planning on going to this museum before, but now that I am, and that way my people know, if you want to know where she was supposed to be or what she was supposed to be doing, go to TripIt. So that I have to be responsible for that. It's not something I just do before I go. I update it as I am out and about.
Thank you, because I've never heard of TripIt before, so I will download that app.
You can send as easy as an email. Anytime you register for something, you rent a car, whatever reservations you have, you can forward an email, and it adds it to your itinerary. And then you can go in there and customize things. And I'm just using the free version. I'm not even using the paid version, which has a lot more features to it. We are about out of time. So if anybody has a question that they need an answer to, this would be the time to ask it. You're very welcome, Kathy. Kathy said, thanks for this valuable info. This helps me out so much as a rookie. That's what that's why I wanted to do this, because these are conversations that don't always get had unless you know somebody who specifically had an incident. And, we're a year into this. Personally, I think it's the beginning of the apocalypse, but, we're in the first year of it. So, we've got to move a little differently. The last talk we had with Danielle, and she talked about, how do you plan travel during a pandemic? It's different now. So same thing about how we move around in countries. It's different. Anybody else have a question? Going once, going twice. Do you use Life 360 app as a locator as well as any other app? Has anybody used Life 360?
I don't do.
Go ahead. No, I was about to say I used it to track my children, but then they deleted it. I have teenagers. I have an 18-year-old and a 16-year-old. They were like, wait, she ain't gonna track us, So, but I did enjoy it. It was nice. And they basically said, we're not going anywhere. If we go anywhere, we're going, or we're with you. So why do we need this? I was like, whatever. Okay. But I know a lot of people here in Mexico City who have that for their whole family, husband, wife, kids, whoever is part of their family. And it's a really good app. So yeah, I would say I highly recommend that app.
I don't use that app, but if I'm out somewhere, especially on road trips, I may do drop live locations in WhatsApp. So different groups. So that's another way you can just drop locations and you'll see, where the person was.
I just left somebody with, this is more of the, in case y'all are trying to find my body, not so much I need medical assistance, but I left the tracking on in Google. So if anybody can access my Google account, they can see where I have been. So I've never heard of Life 360. I'll have to look at that.
Yeah.
Is anybody here a veteran or know any tips for veterans? Because we just got that question. I just know from being in different Facebook groups where people have asked about using their veterans benefits abroad, that it is possible, but you have to sign up for something or change something. I don't know the details of it, so that's all I know. All right, well, thank you, ladies. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you coming and sharing your experience and your expertise with the ladies in the group. Everybody's made positive comments about how useful and helpful this was. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.